What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Jay All Day, and this is an MMA Business Hour episode. And I just want to talk about how absolute dog trash this Apex card is this weekend. I put out a short earlier in the week, and there were so many people super butthurt that I said this card sucks. Okay, I get it. There are some good fighters on this card, but these are not good fights. Look at these odds. And this might be the worst main event I've seen for any UFC event ever. Rozenstruik has lost 3 out of his last 4 fights. Gaziev has 1 win in the Contender Series and 1 UFC win. That's it. And he's 34 years old. Rozenstruik's only win in his last 4 fights was a KO over Chris Dawkins, a guy who has been KO'd by every person he's fought his last 8 fights and is no longer in the UFC. Rozenstruik is not a top contender, even remotely close. It just goes to show you how horrible the UFC heavyweight division is, that Rozenstruik somehow is getting a main event fight versus a guy who has 1 win in the UFC. 1 win. 1 sub in the Contender Series and a KO over some tomato can. Look at these odds. I know everyone's like, don't look at the odds because you're a nerd and you worry about the betting odds and not the fight. Okay, most of these fights, the betting odds have gotten worse as the week went on. The bookies put out big lines, and people thought that those lines were not big enough, so they bet on the favorites even more. So that means people think that these fighters who are favorites are going to win these fights. And by a long shot, look at these odds. Minus 330, minus 370, minus 1300. Umar was like minus 1600 a couple days ago, and then Urkeg is minus 500. So there's nobody besides this dumpster fire main event. There's no fight under minus 330. That's an implied probability win percentage of 80%, guys. That means 8 out of 10 times these guys are going to win these fights. They're not going to be competitive fight. Petrino, undefeated. Makayev, undefeated. But they're not fighting guys that are going to be anything in these divisions. Perez has kind of been there, done that with the top guys at 125 pounds and lost to most of them. And he's going to lose again to Makayev, who will go to 12-1 and probably get a number 1 contender shot or 1 fight away from a number 1 contender fight. And then Umar, how do you go from booking him against Corey Sandhagen, who is one of the most fun, entertaining, cerebral fighters in the UFC, to fighting this guy, Al Marcon, who's never fought in the UFC before, ever? Not 1 UFC fight. Umar has beaten everybody he's fought in the UFC. He was booked against a top 5 guy, and now you're fighting an unranked guy who's never fought in the UFC before. Dana White, tell me how that makes sense. Guys, in the comments below, you love Umar, right? But don't you want to see him fight a guy where the fight's going to be competitive? And God, if Umar somehow loses this fight, that hype train is gone out of the station. It's a lose-lose situation for the UFC. He beat some guy who's never fought in the UFC before. Okay, his stock doesn't go up at all whatsoever, and nobody gives a shit. And then if he loses, it's like you just blew up one of your biggest prospects. And then another fight, Schnell, who's been terrible the majority of his UFC career, versus Urkeg, minus 500. It's like, oh my God. And even the prelim fights, minus 575. This is a pretty even fight. And then minus 900, minus 350, minus 1,000. Can we get some competitive fights? Can we please? Why even put this event on? The Apex is just such a joke to me. No fans. It's such a horrible viewing experience for people paying for ESPN Plus. It just gives Dana White the excuse to not have to try to go sell out an event with this. This event would not sell out. You could put it anywhere. It's not going to sell out. No one's going to pay the exuberant prices the UFC asks for tickets to see this kind of card, man. They're just not going to do it. They're not going to do it. I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of who I think is going to win these fights. It's going to be all favorites. Gaziev is going to win by KO. Petrino's going to win by KO. Makayev is probably going to win a decision. I don't know a lot about this Al Makhan guy, I'm not going to lie, but he's never fought in the UFC before, and to beat Umar Nurmagomedov is an uphill battle, to say the fucking least. Umar's going to win, and Urque's going to win. I would be surprised. I mean, that's the bet to make. Just bet all these favorites. If you bet all these favorites on Bovada or DraftKings or wherever you take your bets, you're probably going to get plus odds with 5 fighters. So, I mean, to take all these monster favorites, get plus odds, you know, I don't ever like doing big parlays, but it just doesn't make any sense to me. Why? Why? And then we have this great card, UFC 299. Next week, I will break down that in the coming days, and UFC 300 is a great card. And then this is just, why are we even doing this? I don't understand, like, you're putting on fights with these monster odds. It doesn't do anything for anyone. So if a guy who's minus 800 wins, it's like, okay, you should have beat this guy. He's a bum. You have an implied win probability of 90%. Of course you should win. There's some good fighters. Petrino, Makayev, and Umar are all potential top 10 guys in their division. Some of them top 5. But they're fighting bums. And I don't want to see good fighters fight bums. I want to see a step up in competition for these guys so we can see who's who in these weight divisions. I want to see Umar fight a top 10 guy. I want to see Petrino fight a better guy than Tyson Pedro. I guess Pedro's probably the livest dog, I would say, maybe, but I don't know. Not a lot to look forward to this weekend. There might be some big finishes, but they're crap fights because they're not competitive fights. We want to see competitive fights. Competitive fights are the most entertaining fights. If Gaziev knocks out Rozenstruik in 30 seconds, like, okay, Rozenstruik's been a human punching bag lately. Like, it doesn't do anything for anyone. I don't love it. Let me know in the comments below. Start shitting on me in the comments below how much you love this card and how these fights are going to be super competitive. I don't see it. Like and subscribe. Peace!